and gentlemen.
Thank you, Minister Roth. Let's now hear from the political groups. Mr. Weber, now for the group of the European People's Party, please.
Mr. President, Commission President, President of Council, dear colleagues, 1.8 trillion euros. A lot of money is now on our table, and the European Parliament, as the budget authority of the European Union, has a huge responsibility. We all know it's not about figures, it's about content. And what does this proposal now mean? 1.8 trillion euro means, first of all, solidarity. Europe is in a deep recession, in a health crisis, and with this approach we show that together we can overcome this. Nowhere else in the world, 27 countries are combining their strengths and their forces to overcome the crisis. Even the rich countries understood that they only can recover if we do it together. 1.8 trillion euros means a clear commitment to the young generation. No second lost generation. This money creates future. This creates new products, new services, new markets, jobs, jobs, jobs. 1.8 trillion euro means protecting our environment, creating a digital Europe. We are the front runner in implementing the Paris Agreement, yes, but now we are providing the necessary means, the necessary money. And yes, we lost the first wave of the digital revolution, but we are committed to win the second one about the industrial data. 1.8 trillion euro means certainty for the final beneficiaries of the EU money in the MFF, the mayors in rural areas, the farmers that can count on us in a globalized world, the researchers, yes, go for innovation. We have now the money for you, and for the students in Erasmus, please look how beautiful Europe is. 1.8 trillion euro means more money for a strong Europe, European level. The big deficit of the outcome in July and the Council conclusions on MFF was that this was dominated by national egoism. And we added again the European added value. When it was about Erasmus, when it was about research, when it was about Frontex and about the health money. In the middle of the corona crisis, the Council had cut the expenditures in fight for a health union dramatically, and we as Parliament, we healed this. 1.8 trillion euro means for us also fairness towards the young generation, because if you borrow money, you have to tell people the truth, how to pay it back. And that's why a decision on own resources is so fundamental, to be honest. Dear colleagues, this 1.8 trillion is then finally also linked to an historic achievement. To link the first time money with the basic principles we believe in, rule of law mechanism. It was a red line for us in the European Parliament that we will not allow to change the trialogue outcome, and this red line is now respected. For me and for my group, this is a game changer. In the last 20, 30 years, we saw first a process of strengthening rule of law in the European Union, especially with the enlargement process, and then we saw a process of weakening rule of law in today's European Union. This mechanism is now again a strong base for defending this rule of law. The last days gave us the proof that the plan B, so to link the money to the rule of law, really works, because the COVID-25 consideration was then a powerful tool to create the readiness to find a conclusion on the Council side. We need now an independent Commission who is ready to use the new tool from the first day on, and I thank Ursula, Commission President, for the clear commitment in this regard. This mechanism is not against the country, this mechanism is in favour of Europe. And dear colleagues, I also want to underline that with this new mechanism we have now a fact-based and an independent assessment, not, let me say, a party political one. The European Parliament plays in the future no role anymore in this process. It's up to the Commission and then finally up to the courts to decide on these things. I think that is important. If we want to have credibility for the process, we need a fact-based assessment and an independent activity from the Commission. So, Madam Commission President, if you use the new tool independently, I think that is the best service you can do for defending the European way of life in tomorrow's world. This agreement, dear colleagues, is a compromise, and Charles Michel was referring to this. It's not about winners and losers in today's European Union. I'm happy that we have the agreement now on the table, but I also respect other considerations, other views on the subject on the table. And that has to be accepted. Europe is that we all can live with an outcome. Again, the message is that the red lines from the European Parliament were respected, but all countries are on board, and that is good. I finally want to thank, first of all, Ursula von der Leyen for the innovative idea of the Next Generation EU Fund, based on the Lisbon Treaty, for the Plan B consideration, your commitment to defend the rule of law. I want to thank the German presidency, especially Angela Merkel. In my group, colleagues called her the mother of compromises. I think that is a great title for her. I thank her for this. And I thank our NEGO team, all colleagues who contributed to this big outcome, to this great success. The European Parliament showed that we are the parliament of the citizens. We defend their interests. They can count on their parliament. And the European People's Party will tomorrow support all related dossiers. Let's now start to implement it. Thank you so much.
Grazie, Presidente Garcia.
Thank you very much. And now, Madam Garcia Perez, on behalf of the S&D Group.
Señorías.
Ladies and gentlemen, this has been a very special year. Nobody would have imagined the situation that all citizens of Europe have experienced. The COVID epidemic has caused us to reinvent ourselves, working to find some way to confront these particular challenges, to work in an intelligent fashion. And intelligent means being united. I want to believe that citizens have understand the work that is done by the European Union in order to resolve the various challenges and problems before us. It's been a year of intense work, difficult work, because of distance, because of the way that we have worked. Now we see the fruits of all of this, and I'd like to thank the German presidency for having dealt with these ever so difficult issues. There have been frenetic attempts to deal with the various issues, close issues, trilogues, numerous different issues. Many colleagues have worked hours and hours with the Commission, with the German presidency, to achieve what we now have before us. And this Parliament has been open to cooperation, to working concertedly and meeting our responsibilities. And we continue to do that. We now have an agreement with regard to, we hope to have an agreement with the UK as well. We've worked in a frenetic fashion in order to meet our responsibilities for the good of Europe and for the good of European citizens. Now, the role of the Parliament over these last couple of months, the main political groups, we have worked together in a united fashion with the Council and the Commission, and unprecedented achievements have been made, historic in nature. For example, a budgetary agreement for the next couple of years, we've increased by 16 billion, and this, of course, with the help of the Council, we've put together a mechanism for the future which will link rule of law with the budget. These are very important issues for us Europeans because it makes our values stronger. And the European Union has achieved in October the first system of bonus, a bonus system with social bonus of billions, and of course recuperation funds as well. These are major achievements in creating a more robust union. We learned a lot from the 2008 crisis, that austerity cannot be the response, that we can't leave out those who need us most. It doesn't mean cuts. It means investment, because we're investing in the future, in a much more sustainable future. And there is that necessity to protect the planet as well. That is absolutely imperative. So the agreements with regard to the 55% reduction in CO2 emissions before 2030, very important. We need great ambition indeed in order, if we want to achieve that neutrality. And I'd like to remind you that 70% reduction was proposed by this particular Parliament, but we're calling for a Europe which involves social investment as well, a more democratic system, reducing inequality, not increasing inequality, and teaching online for all. We're all aware of the difficulties that numerous different families have experienced over this time, this period of quarantine, because it was extremely difficult to deal with online teaching because there were no computers, there was no internet, there wasn't all that necessary for that all could have access to education. Europe helped in achieving all of this, to improving all of this. That is Europe. And this without having to put aside any of our principles and values. We didn't have to choose between values and economic recuperation, because if we would do that, we would lose our essence, we would lose our soul as Europeans. So, fundamental values and principles, and just as Madame von der Leyen said, it is our trust in you and the trust of our citizens in the system overall. We cannot have violation of rule of law. This is a red line. We have to be proud, honourable colleagues, for the work that we've done in this Parliament on this front. Now, under the Council presidency and with Madame von der Leyen, we've worked together concertedly in an extremely extraordinary year of unusually difficult conditions. It wouldn't have been possible without this concerted effort. And let us also remember those who have worked together with us, and those also who have not been so lucky, who have lost their jobs, who have lost all that they had because of the uncertainty before us. We know that it's necessary to be prudent. We have to, however, be optimistic with regard to 2021. There is vaccination. The possibility of vaccination now exists before us. And that has been secured by the efforts made by the European Union for the citizens of the European Union and for our neighbours as well. But we have to continue struggling. We cannot simply lay on our laurels. We have to work for the future. And indeed, we will have to understand that there are deficiencies. We have to see them. We have to work together. We now have numerous different mechanisms that we have to work on for the future and implement tools in order to deal with those different issues that exist before us. The very fundamental question is, why are we here? If we're not here to change the lives of people for the future, for the better, what are we doing? We have to ask. And we have worked up until now concertedly. Jacques Delors, 3 decades ago, told us that if we don't have a social Europe, we cannot have a single market. And we have to move forward with effective leadership in the Council. The Portuguese presidency has much to do before us. Social reform is absolutely imperative. A social Europe, a Europe of rights for citizens. And the negotiations, of course, have not come to an end. A conference for the future of Europe is necessary so that our citizens can see what are doing and so that we can deliver to our citizens for a better future for all. Thank you. Thank you very much, President Cholos of the Renew Europe Group. 3 minutes, please.
President, 2020 was a very different year, and the only thing we'll really recall, I think, is the pandemic. It tried our social, economic and political systems. At the start of the year, we should recognise that the crisis showed the weakness of the European project, given the lack of coordination on the first wave. We still recall the closing of borders, but this year has also shown our capacity to respond and has given real perspectives for deepening our union. The joint work to research a vaccine is one example, as is the recovery fund that has boosted the MFF. We're going to build Europe around shared priorities such as the Green Deal and digitalisation. So we've worked to react to the crisis, but in addition, with this package of measures that we've taken decisions that will sustainably mark the European project. I'm thinking of new own resources, for example, and the rule of law mechanism. And this shows that under the pressure of difficult realities, we can move forward in Europe.
Measures, I want to tell you, Madam President, that both myself and my group listened carefully your words, and I welcome your statement that law prevails over political declaration, because the European Commission must fully respect the treaties. Indeed, its primary function is to do just that, and apply the text as decided by co-legislators as soon as enter into force, and without any further constraint. And this is extremely important for my group. We are very happy that we have this rule of law mechanism. It should be enforced starting of the beginning of the year and fully as the text prevails. I would also like to point out that most of these measures were born here in this hemicycle, and that they were able to see the light of the day because we were able to build a solid majority to carry them through to the end. And I would like to thank to my colleagues that we proved that the Parliament can be united when it's about reinforcing the European Union. And this is something that we have to keep in mind, because the work is not finished yet, far from it. Over and above the many legislative dossiers that are in the pipeline, we must make Europe more responsive. Its decision must be faster and clear, and to do that, we should use the opportunity of the conference for the future of Europe we are pushing for since the beginning of the mandate. Because this crisis has shown us the structural problem caused by the question of unanimity in the Council, who block a lot of important decisions for the European Union. And this is not about not giving the possibility to each member state to be part of the decision. But if the objective of some member states is only to block without a strong argument, this is not the way to develop Europe. So let's not be afraid to debate this and to find the right solution. Above all, let us never forget that Europe is most effective when it is united, determined, and put its citizens at the heart of its decisions and ambitions. Thank you very much.
Grazie.
Thank you very much. President Zanni of the Identity and Democracy Group. Thank you very much, President. I'd like to point out an agreement which is ambiguous, particularly because of the various political elements that are there and the factitiousness as well. Now, the resolution which that we voted on expresses, indeed, has a number of different difficulties and dangers in its method and in its character as well. The issue of legitimacy is something which has to be taken into consideration. And I would like to say that it is important that we ought not forget that the European Union exists because of the will of the member states and the issues of sovereignty, very delicate ones indeed, that it is the sovereignty of each member state in union that brings together and creates this particular union. And the various threats that have been issued by the Council, bolstered then by the Commission as well, on national sovereignty are issues which are of extreme concern. And for that particular reason, quite the opposite as what Carl Cholos said, I would like to reaffirm something, and that is that unanimity indeed is the only way that democracy can be expressed. And it is only that through unanimity that member states of the European Union can be fairly represented within this particular structure. Now, the issue of a minority political parties, minority groups, and the squashing of them, this is something which is, I feel, to be totally unacceptable. So, indeed, there is uncertainty out on the horizon of a legal in a legal and legislative sense as well. So we have to see how things will pan out following the ECJ decision. Now, this kind of muscle flexing between the institutions is something which disconcerts the citizens of the European Union as well. I think it's very important for there to be a very clear line established by the institutions and not this particular competition that exists as well. Now, instrument which will provide for the majority of Europeans that which we're celebrating today is indeed very, very myopic in nature and doesn't meet all of those particular needs which it has trumpeted to. Thank you very much. On behalf of the Greens now, Madam Ska Keller.
Colleagues, it is good to see that finally, in the 11th hour, the European Council gave its green light so that the support for citizens and economies hit hard by the pandemic can finally start. Neither the European citizens and economies hit hard, nor the climate could have waited any longer. But while it's really good that those agreements have been reached, there is quite some worrying trends attached to each of the decisions. And the past weeks have seen a sad show of obstructions by the governments of Hungary and Poland, who wanted to take the recovery fund hostage for their own anti-democratic agenda. And Mr. Orban and Mr. Kaczynski, you neither serve your citizens nor our common European future. And in the light of such blackmail, we all need to stay and stand strong. And therefore, it is really worrying to see the European Council's attempt to interpret the political agreement and the law agreed by the European Parliament and the Council. That is highly problematic. Even more worrying probably is the Commission's role in this affair. The Commission, as the guardian of the treaties, must reaffirm that its intention is to apply the legislation to the letter, as agreed by the co-legislators, and without any delay. And that also means that not waiting for some judgments until some guidelines would be drawn up. We have a law in place. It needs to be applied without any delay, and that is crucial. And coupled with the presidency's failure to organise a hearing on the Article 7 proceedings on Hungary, this really makes for a poor track record for the European Union in its tackling of systemic democratic regressions in the middle of our common union. And I want to stress again that the only law agreed is what Parliament and Council, as co-legislators, have decided previously. Nothing of that law has changed, nothing of that law will change, and it needs to be enforced as of January 1st, 2021, for both the current and the upcoming MFF. And on climate action, I welcome that the governments managed to strengthen the European 2030 emission reduction targets, though a net decrease of at least minus 55% is still far short of the needed scientific consensus of minus 65%. The Parliament has made a strong mandate of a greenhouse gas emission of minus 60%, which we will continue to fight for in the upcoming weeks and months, because again, the law is done in the normal legislative procedure. However, that this target agreed by the Council of 55% reduction is not an absolute, but a net target is extremely worrying. And yes, of course, we must protect and restore land, forests and other ecosystems in our fight to reverse climate change. But this should never be a compensation for lessening efforts from the biggest emitters. If the European Union is to be a global leader in fighting climate change, we'll need to do more than just come up with some creative calculations. It's regrettable that the European Council gave in to pressure from the usual suspects, I have to say, to endorse in its conclusions gas as transitional fuel, which it is simply not. If we're to overcome the climate crisis, the future has to be completely fossil fuel free. The exclusion of all fossil fuels from the Just Transition Fund was such a clear signal, and the European Council should have followed suit. We expect and we need more ambition to tackle the problems at hand, and we need less double standards from the heads of state and government. I hope this will still improve in the future, and I count on our common normal legal proceedings in order to make a good climate law. Thank you so much.
Grazie.
Thank you. Our next speaker is colleague van Overtveld.
Presidents, colleagues.
is erin geslaagd om haar eigen accenten te leggen en om de middelen voor toekomstgerichte programma's gericht op scholing, innovatie, technologische vernieuwing en ontwikkeling te vrijwaren en zelfs te versterken. Dit zijn de programma's waarin de EU echte meerwaarde kan creëren en het verschil kan maken.
These are the areas where the EU can create genuine added value. But there are still a number of rather entrenched policy choices present in the European budget, which continue to demand a great deal of attention and resources. And I think the shift towards more forward-looking policies could have been even more determined. The European Union does regularly seem to have a bit of a problem in finding the right level of ambition, and this also applies to climate policy. Europe can take the lead in bringing about a sustainable transition, but the ambition of reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 55% for 2030 raises questions. No serious impact assessment has been carried out at EU level or at member state level, and also I don't think that the impact of COVID-19 has been sufficiently taken into account in setting this ambition, and nor has the impact in terms of carbon leakage and on SMEs have been sufficiently taken into account. And I think many of these concerns are clearly set out in the analysis carried out by Parliament's own research centre, the EPRS. So it would make a lot of sense, I think, to organise a debate on the content of that study. It must also be clear that each region has its own possibilities and opportunities to reduce carbon emissions in a cost-efficient way. Flanders is a small and densely populated region with limited open spaces and with important energy-intensive industrial clusters. Europe must take these differences into account. Thank you.
Presidente Aubry.
Thank you very much. Now, on behalf of the GUE group, Madame Aubry.
Chers collègues.
Colleagues, winter has arrived. Europe is preparing to celebrate the holidays, but European leaders are telling us a Christmas fairy tale. Once again, an MFF that's historic and a historic recovery plan that's supposed to save Europe, end the climate disaster, protect human rights and end the crisis. It's almost Christmas, so we want to believe it. But your fairy tale, unfortunately, doesn't reflect reality and is deceptive for our citizens. Let me begin with democracy. You represent the fact that human rights, you're a knight protecting human rights against the forces of evil. Our Parliament had asked for a mechanism to ensure that the rights were respected. You gave in, however, to the blackmail of the far right. You watered the mechanism down and postponed it. Little Red Riding Hood was eaten by Orban the wolf. What's been done basically sets case law for all those who want to move towards authoritarianism, like Macron in France, who is calling into question freedoms of religion and information with his laws that he's implementing. Now, once upon a time, the three kings, Macron, Merkel, were going to save the European people, but unfortunately, the European people will be disappointed when they see their gifts under the Christmas tree. The 16 billion extra euros will do nothing. The budget is far smaller than our Parliament wanted and is even lower than the Commission's initial proposal. Fewer investments for agriculture, education, research, the environment and health. The recovery plan is conditioned on the recommendations based on neoliberalism and austerity, which come from the European semester. The financial transaction tax, like any initiative that aims to make those who benefit from the crisis pay, is simply kicked into the long grass. Basically, the packing hides poisoned gifts. But the fairy tale doesn't stop there. On the climate, you tell us the wonderful story of a European Union which is in the vanguard of the noble quest to save the planet. But your 55% greenhouse gas emissions target by 2030 is already lower than the Parliament had adopted. What's worse, it's incompatible with the Paris Agreement, which, according to scientists, needs a target of at least 65%, without talking about your accounting tricks, which mean that carbon sinks such as forests can be deducted while ignoring the carbon footprint of our imports. It's all magic. On social rights, on the climate, on democracy, once again the European Union wanted to see itself as a progressive hero fighting on the side of the good against evil. But quite honestly, no one is going to be fooled by this wonderful fairy story, even at Christmas. I've got a scoop for you. For a long time we have not believed in the liberal Father Christmas because we're being treated like children. Thank you.
Grazie. Non iscritti,
Thank you very much. Now, Madam Pignedoli, a non-attached member.
Cari colleghi,
Colleagues, the Five-Star Movement says 3 yeses. Yes to the Recovery Fund, a symbol for a new Europe, for the future, learning from the errors of the past. Goodbye to austerity. For the first time, we have the proper transfer of resources to the countries in need. Yes to the MFF. Not perfect, but the programs Horizon, Erasmus, InvestEU have been bolstered, very important for young people, and we've opened the possibility for own resources. Yes to the rule of law, non-negotiable that is. We defend an independent judiciary and a free press. With these 3 yes, the future of European citizens changes. And we put away and put aside the machinations of people like Orban. But there's still something to do. The fight against the mafia, organized crime, and those who put their hand into the European coffers illegally. But I do feel that today Europe is victorious, a Europe of equality, solidarity, and justice. Thank you very much. Now, those who want to speak without a mask can do that from here, from the podium. They can do that with safety there, the safety of all, in other words, because there are problems if, of course, people take the floor without a mask elsewhere. At this point, I'd like to invite